So World War One.
Yeah.
What do we have here?
What you have here is typically what a World War One uniform would look like. The foot locker that would go with you, the helmet. This is a World War One bomb that you'd throw out of an airplane. Remember, we didn't have bombardiers. We just let them over the side, let them out. That was technology then. This would be an aviation badge here. And if you look at this, now this is really poignant. If you look at that photo up there, that uniform, or those two gentlemen, that's father, World War One uniform, and son, World War II. Because remember, World War One and World War II were less than a generation apart. So now that's all wool. Can you imagine wearing that on a hot day?
Oh, no.
You know, and then you had the boots, you had all of these things, and of course, you know, World War One. Remember, World War One, we still had cavalry on horses.
That's amazing.
Tanks were in their infancy. They were these contraptive looking things that had gears and sprockets and could barely maneuver around a battlefield. And the airplane was new too.
It's funny how much things change in that one generation between the wars.
World War One, you know, you had biplanes, you know, with the two wings and and things like that, and they were very spindly looking things, and they would, you know, how the first aerial combat, from I was told, you know, I read once, you know, they used the airplane to spy on their troop movements. And so one time, you know, the Germans had them, the British had them, and one time a guy said, "I'll fix you. I'll pull out my pistol and I'll shoot you down." And so they started putting guns on airplanes. Bombs or whatever were handheld, and they were just dropped over the side of the airplane to bomb something, you know.
Wow.
So very, very primitive to what we have now.
Just very much between wars. That's what I'm so surprised about when you think about it.
You had airplanes that did 100 miles an hour. That was fast, you know, and they would get in these dog fights. And, oh, by the way, if you got shot down, you had no parachute. So you rode it in.
And that was pretty easy to do on these planes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were fabric covered. Wood frame, you know,
almost like the Wright brothers. They're not far off from that.
Not far off.
Not far off.
We were only about 12 years removed from the Wright brothers' first flight, you know. And so the Germans also used, to bomb England, they used what they call Zeppelins, which were these big, rigid frame, balloon-looking airships that were very, very vulnerable, so they could get shot down real easy. So because they had gas in the, you know, like hydrogen in there, and of course if you hit it, it would explode with a bullet. So yeah, World War One, very, very costly war, but nothing in compared to what World War II was a generation later. You know, World War II, I think because it was World War One was basically Europe. Okay, you still had royalty fighting royalty, you know.
Right.
It was just. The World War II actually, you know,
the world
was the world, and I believe I heard one figure of 50 million deaths.
Oh my goodness!
So you know, think about all of California, probably Arizona and Nevada. All the people died.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And this continues on. This is some more artifacts from World War II. You're right. World War One is very different than World War II. Just looking at this, it's like, wow. I feel like I'm back in the 1800s almost.
Almost, you know.
Almost.
You had to take care of your uniform too. So there's your sewing kit. You had to sew buttons on or darn your socks, or, you know, we have a bayonet there that went on the end of a rifle. And, you know, it looks like what you have is stirrups here.
That's what
because remember, the Army still had horses. We had cavalry yet. The helmet, you can see, is very much different from World War II. It was World War One, you know, was a quote. The catchphrase was "the war to end all wars." Well, we know that was not
the case.
You know, so we had you know, Treaty of Versailles and all that was basically not adhered to and really wasn't enforced, unfortunately, but. You see here, this is what you'd wear. There's your leggings, the boots, the shirts, all that. And you look at the conditions you're in at. World War I was a lot of trench warfare. And you were in trenches, you were in, and you know, Sparkle, a lot of those trenches are still there. They're preserved. There was actually an excavation, and I think it was in Germany or France, or it might have been the Ardennes, here not too long ago, where they actually unearthed a shelter in a German trench, and they found 6 bodies in there that were just skeletons by this time, but their helmets and all that had died in there.
There was a lot of hands-on combat at that point.
Oh yeah. It was. They were fighting over yards, not miles. I mean, it would be like we have a trench here, and maybe 100 feet away there's another trench, and we're fighting over this little bit of land in between these trenches.
There's probably some horses that are dead down there too.
Oh, I'm sure.
You have all of this just got in the crossfires.
Yeah, you had carts, you had wagons.
Really cool. You could see that. I mean, it's just really taking you back to like that was definitely
that was
the time.
That was the time, you know. And World War I, you know, brought mechanized armor into the fray, and it brought the airplane in, and it brought these other things. And then when, you know, World War I, the armistice was signed in 1918, the United States became really an isolationist nation. We didn't want anything to do with anybody else or their wars, and which contributed to our military technologically lacking before World War II, and in numbers too, because they got very little money to modernize or do things. But World War I certainly was nothing like World War II ended up being. It's unfortunate that, you know, world leaders let the pundits of another country take over.
And how many World War I planes do we have here at Castle Air Museum?
Oh, unfortunately none. Even in museums, I think the only original World War I airplanes you may find is in the Smithsonian or at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. A lot of the other ones you find are usually replicas, because remember
that would be very that'd be very hard to find one.
Yeah, they were wood, they were fabric, they weren't, you know, museum piece. You know, we're just going to beat this thing up, and you know, you're out in the elements, things rotted and so on. But to actually find originals is a very, very tall order. You know, it's almost impossible to find. It's very hard now to find World War II airplanes. You know, so we're fortunate to have a number of those.
So, subscribe to our YouTube channel.